This is TechCrunch. The Y Combinator-backed insurance tech startup Corgi became embroiled in yet another controversy last week when Papermark, maker of open-source data room software, accused Corgi of stealing its software and passing it off as its own. Now, Corgi denied that, telling TechCrunch no code was used from Papermark. But there were reasons why people believed the initial allegation, which was made by Papermark co-founder Mark Seitz on X, concerning Corgi's newly released product called Data Room. Seitz's post blew up because he shared screenshots showing Corgi's product using the same language for the same features as Papermark's, word for word. Deal Room software is essentially secure document sharing. It is famously used by startups to pitch VCs and send them supporting materials for due diligence. Now, Seitz went as far as to call Corgi's new product copyright and license infringing and fraud. Corgi's co-founder and CEO Nico Lacqua saw the tweet and promised to investigate, and soon after he posted on X his full denial with receipts of his own, showing that the code was different between the two products. While he strenuously pushed back on the allegations of a license violation, he did admit that relying on a vibe coding design led to the replica features. He said, looking back, we should have leaned more into our own language and visual choices instead of taking cues from existing products in the space, and that's on us. A Corgi spokesperson confirmed to TechCrunch that the offending features were vibe-coded and said they have already been changed, downplaying the situation. The spokesperson told TechCrunch the issues were isolated to visual elements on two peripheral settings pages, adding that those elements were immediately updated and that our team confirmed that no code was used from Papermark. Lacqua and the spokesperson also accused Papermark of making these accusations because Corgi is offering a less expensive product. Lacqua said, "I get that this stings since we're putting out something mostly free that competes with his SaaS. I'd be mad too." Yet, this clearly was not just sour grapes when identical features and wording were used. It's about a new question. If vibe coding makes it so easy to copy the look, feel, and every function of another's work, while not copying every line of the code itself, how much does it matter if the source is not identical? Obviously, legally speaking, it's the only thing that matters. So this is not the same as the controversy over Y Combinator alum Pair AI, a 2024 startup that admitted to cloning another open-source project and releasing it under its own license. Morally speaking, this is ambiguous and will become increasingly common. As fellow YC alum and founder of the agent operating system OpenPros, Dan Barrett explained on X, in a world where a bot can trivially copy one-to-one the structure of something even if the character-level code diverges, what makes one unacceptable and the other not? Existing IP law incidental to the old world? Is there not some greater principle at work here? Now, Corgi is vigorously trying to clean up any reputational damage. It has issued a cease and desist letter to Seitz demanding that he take down the tweet, the company confirmed to TechCrunch. The founder of Hello World Cafe, which somewhat competes with Corgi's coffee shop business, also contended on X that he got a cease and desist letter from Corgi's lawyers for his tweet that joked about the data room controversy. Now, this latest hullabaloo adds to a growing list of chatter around Corgi. The 2-year-old startup, for instance, has a growing reputation for being litigious. It's already sued various former employees. Lacqua also recently went viral for his comments on Harry Stebbings' podcast about how he expects employees to work 7 days a week. Whatever you can get done in 5 days, I promise you, you'll get more done in 6 and 7. Now, that is, of course, the fallacy of startup hustle culture, right? Decades of research repeatedly conclude that human productivity is not a quadratic equation. While sprints can be effective and build camaraderie for short-term problems like the site going down, the research shows that as a matter of routine, more hours of work reduces productivity, not the other way around. The startup also got tongues wagging for how fast it has raised money with increasing valuations, even by AI startup standards. Last month, Corgi raised a $106 million Series B1, valuing the company at $2.6 billion. Just 3 weeks after announcing a $160 million Series B at a $1.3 billion valuation, and 4 months after its $108 million Series A. The AI-driven demand for compute power has data centers looking to squeeze more from every rack of GPUs. One consequence? Bacterial outbreaks. The liquid for liquid-cooled chips is a mixture of water and a substance that inhibits bacteria growth. To run the chips hotter, data center managers can change the mix to include more water, which absorbs heat better but leads to nasty contamination that clogs the flow. To solve that, they flush the system, which can mean shutting down a rack for 5 or 6 hours at a potential cost of millions of dollars. Omen AI has a solution. A tiny spectrometer that can monitor that fluid health in real time, spotting bacterial growth before it becomes a massive problem. CEO and founder Zach LaBerge said, "You're not risking huge amounts of downtime because you have no insight into what's going on chemically." Well, Omen AI said it raised a $31 million Series A round this week, led by Nava Ventures and including participation from CRV, Vanderbilt University, Man Plus Hummel, Star Hill Holdings, and Hard Launch Capital, as well as personal investments from executives at Bridgestone, GM, Johnson Controls, and TensorWave. LaBerge founded his first company back in 2020 when he was 14, raising $3 million to install sensors on construction equipment and ultimately dropping out of high school. After that startup shut down, LaBerge started Omen in 2024 with the idea of focusing on fluid systems as the key to enabling construction machinery to be smart enough to know when it needed to be fixed. The idea was to replace the time-consuming process of extracting samples and sending them to a lab with real-time awareness. Besides bacterial growth, the device can spot pumps and pumps wearing out if it sees copper or chromium, or seals if it sees silicon. Caterpillar dealerships were a key early customer for Omen's heavy vehicles business, but Caterpillar is also a major supplier of gas-powered turbines and generators to provide on-premises power for data centers. It did not take long for Omen to see where the wind was blowing. That was kind of the transition, LaBerge told TechCrunch. About 6 months ago, a lot of the dealerships were saying, "Hey, we're starting to put sensors on our turbines. Can you guys do anything on the building side of things?" Omen discovered that those buildings are full of fluid, from their HVAC systems to their chip cooling. Spotting a new, fast-growing group of potential customers, Omen began to focus on data centers. Corey Rellis, a partner at Nava Ventures, who sits on Omen's board, said, "It's rare to see such a young founder who has the respect of established large corporations in a space that moves a bit more slowly. For Omen in particular, much of our diligence came through our introductions with large customers, which quickly validated their approach." Omen, which has raised $40 million since its founding in 2024, is working with a dozen data center customers as they build out their offering, including TensorWave, a company building an AI compute cloud on AMD chips. While many organizations rely on mailing fluid samples to labs for insight, Omen is not alone in developing on-premises analytics. Pyxis, an established water monitoring firm, rolled out its data center coolant monitoring product earlier this month. The key tech advances that unlocked this approach are recent improvements in both optical technologies and signal processing software. LaBerge said, "Hardware is just cheap enough that it makes sense to play at scale, and then signal processing lets us make more sense out of the noise." That's all for now. For the latest tech news, go to TechCrunch.com.